May 8th, 1982. The Ferrari car turned into a cloud of debris. Behind the wheel was Jay Villeneuve. Not just the driver, but someone Enzo Ferrari loved the most. Jay and we were like father and son. Gilles was so eager to win that he didn't even put on his safety belt. But why did he risk so much? To understand how he got to this point, let's go back to 1982, the year that changed Formula One forever. At the beginning of the season, it seemed like it would be Ferrari's year. Yes, even then, the Tifosi already had their own false confidence. But this year seemed different. They had a completely redesigned car, an improved turbo engine, and two young and very fast drivers, Gilles Villeneuve and Didier Pironi. But the very first race started with complete disaster. The drivers simply refused to take part in the race and locked themselves in a hotel. So you might be wondering why. Well, in the backdrop of this season, there was a Cold War brewing between FISA and FOCA. When the drivers were required to sign a new super license, this Cold War suddenly exploded. Pironi, who was the president of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, went on strike. As everyone crammed into a hotel room, look at these photos of almost 30 drivers in one room. It's damn atmospheric. Especially when you look closely at how Alain Prost and Gilles Villeneuve share a mattress. Imagine if now Verstappen and Hamilton were sharing mattresses. While this was a dark cloud over the F1 season's beginning, Villeneuve would describe this moment among his friends as the best night of his life. It wasn't just his best night. It was his most memorable moment at Ferrari, with the growing legend of Gilles Villeneuve at its core. Enzo Ferrari promised this season would be different. Ferrari was back after 2 disappointing years, and the world was in their hands. Though small, Villeneuve was an absolute demon on the track. Fearless, daring. Look at Villeneuve, and willing to risk everything to win. That's why they called him the Little Prince. He captured the hearts of fans, rivals, and most of all, Enzo Ferrari. Enzo once said he loved him like a son. People used to say that one day he'd quit Ferrari, but I never believed it, because Gilles and I had formed such an affection for each other. We were like father and son. Having lost his own son at 20, Enzo's bond with Villeneuve went beyond racing. He was family. At first, his teammate Pironi was amazed at how loyal everyone was to Gilles, but despite this, Villeneuve extended a warm welcome to Didier, and the two became close friends. It made me fit right in, and I felt at home right away. Gilles made no distinctions either. He treated me like an equal.
With Gilles, however, he struck up an incredible friendship. Have any special friends in racing? You know, my teammate. We are very close friends. These two would travel the road together, get into all sorts of trouble. I was friends with Gilles. And Gilles. They were unbelievably competitive about the speed. It seemed like an unbreakable bond. Although everything seemed perfect, both drivers scored almost no points in the first races. The race in San Marino became a crucial one for them in the championship. If Ferrari wanted to turn the season around, this would really be it. And it seemed like fate intervened on their behalf. Because the FOCA-aligned teams, in their ongoing dispute, boycotted the race, leaving only 14 cars on the grid. As the race started, their other main competition, Renault, had both of their cars face an early retirement due to technical issues. This seemed like Ferrari's moment. The only thing that could beat them now was themselves. As the race entered its final laps, Villeneuve was leading as he did throughout the race. Ferrari was poised for a 1-2 finish. Now, this is where we have to focus on the details, because what happens next will change Formula One. him. He was a figure loved by all, especially by Ferrari fans. But this loss hurt none deeper than Enzo Ferrari, who had not only lost his star, his superstar, but also a friend. A friend that was very close to his heart. Enzo said, "We were like father and son. My life is full of sad memories. I look back and I see my loved ones, and among my loved ones, I see the face of this great man." On May 11th, Villeneuve's funeral was held in his hometown of Barchieville. His coffin was draped in a checkered flag, fitting for a racer. Fans stood in silence, some clutching memorabilia, others wiping away tears. You could feel it in the air for blocks. The grief was palpable, especially during the heart-wrenching moment when Jill's mother broke down in tears, her sorrow echoing the loss felt by everyone present. Jody Scheckter, his former teammate and close friend, delivered an emotional speech.
He was the fastest racing driver that history has ever known. He went doing something that he loved.
He was the fastest racing driver that history has ever known. He went doing something that he loved. But he hasn't left us, because the world will remember what he has given to motor racing. Jill's death was still fresh in everyone's mind. An eerie undertone of death loomed over the season, especially Pironi, who was Ferrari's last hope. He had a good race in Detroit where he finished third, and then headed to the newly named Gilles Villeneuve circuit in Montreal. Montreal, Canada. The Isle Notre Dame, in the basin of the St. Lawrence River. But then, in this cursed season, something unexpected happened. As Pironi secured pole position and was one of the favorites to win, his Ferrari stalled at the grid. While many around him managed to go around his car, the very back of the pack, Italian Riccardo Paletti, was accelerating. And there's all sorts of trouble on the bridge. He hit the car, suffering chest injuries. But just as the medical team arrived, the car burst into flames. And the car's on fire! The car has burst into flames! Of course, it's absolutely full of fuel because at the start of the race, the tank's absolutely full.
But there were 5 races left in the season, and each of them was decisive. On August 7th, 1982, in the wet, drenched forests of Hockenheim, Germany, despite the horrendous conditions, Pironi was more motivated than ever to secure a strong position for Ferrari. The car was so good that Didier was 4 to 5 seconds faster than the others. He was obsessed to the point of madness. The rain was forming a wall of spray, making the track disappear from view. As he headed into the Hockenheim forest section, which snakes through a dense pine forest, he was overtaking the Williams car, driven by Derek Daly. Through a huge ball of spray, he collided with Alain Prost and his Renault. Just like at Zolder, Pironi's car went flying into the air. Thankfully, emergency services arrived quickly on the scene to find another Ferrari absolutely disintegrated on the track. Doctors rushed to help Didier, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. In a delirious plea, he begged them not to amputate his legs, which had been completely shattered. His arm and ankle were also severely damaged, nearly crushed to dust. However, F1 doctor Sid Watkins promised they wouldn't touch his legs. Luckily, they were able to stabilize Didier as much as possible. He spent the rest of the 1982 season in the hospital, watching as he lost the championship by just 1 point. With the extent of his injuries, Didier retired from Formula One. But during the 1986 season, as he slowly recovered, Pironi began to seriously consider a return to F1. In the meantime, Unable to stay away from the thrill of racing, Didier ventured into powerboating. On August 23, 1987, while working on his F1 comeback, he was competing in a powerboat race off the Isle of Wight, but his boat struck an oil tanker, causing it to flip. The accident claimed the lives of Pironi and his 2 crew members. The tragedy bore a haunting resemblance to that of his teammate, Gilles Villeneuve. Didier left behind his pregnant wife, Catherine. She later gave birth to 2 sons. In a heartfelt tribute, she named them Didier and Gilles, honoring both their father and his former teammate. Gilles' legacy resonated throughout the F1 world, affecting no one more profoundly than his son, Jacques Villeneuve, who followed in his father's footsteps, joining Formula One with Williams in 1996, and in 1997 achieved what his father never could. He became the first Canadian world champion.
Initially, Gilles thought this was just Didier entertaining the crowd, so he retook the lead and wasn't aggressively defended. Takes this opportunity, comes out to the left, and it could be that Pironi is going to be beaten and they go through absolutely together. And Ferrari leads again, another change. But Pironi took a more serious step. He overtook Villeneuve on the last lap to win. At the last possible second, he's got him, he's going wide. Whoa, fantastic. Villeneuve was nearly passed, but there we go. Didier Pironi wins. Magnificent race. This move sent shockwaves throughout the audience, and especially the team. But above all else, it was Gilles who was absolutely devastated. For Villeneuve, it was a betrayal of a friend. It was especially painful that it happened in his team, whose rules he had always respected. In 1979, Gilles had a chance to become a champion. Then Jody Scheckter was the #1 in Ferrari. Villeneuve refused to fight for the title.
While this seemed like an innocuous incident between 2 competing teammates, the story went deeper. For Pironi, it was a calculated business decision. He later justified it by saying, "Slow means to be careful not to crash." But there was no restriction on overtaking. But to Gilles, it was nothing less than a deep personal betrayal. They were seen together at the podium, with Gilles visibly ticked off. When reporters later asked, "Gilles, have you spoken to Pironi?" he simply replied, "I've declared war." For Villeneuve, this was personal. He said, "Before this, our relationship had always been good and I trusted him, but I won't make the same effing mistake again." While Ferrari did their best to do PR and calm everything down, everyone saw through what had just happened. And they saw it, most of all, on Gilles' face. Coming into Belgium, everything was different. The week after, I was on my phone for hours trying to calm down Gilles. He could not calm down. It seemed like the stage was set for a season-long rivalry between the 2 teammates, doing everything in his power to prove that he was way better than Pironi. May 8th, 1982, in the final qualifying session, Didier had set a time that was just 0.1 seconds faster than Villeneuve. With 8 minutes remaining and on rundown tyres, Gilles went out one more time to beat Pironi. Villeneuve was flying on that lap. When he approached Jochen Maas's car, which was much slower, Maas, who was aware of Villeneuve approaching, moved to the right to allow him space on the racing line. At the same time, Villeneuve moved to the right to overtake, which led to... As other drivers, including John Watson and Derek Warwick, rushed to the scene, they found an absolutely horrifying sight. A Ferrari torn in 2 and Villeneuve's body thrown across the track to the other side. It was a terrible accident. Villeneuve was flying at a speed of more than 200 kilometers per hour. The impact was of an airplane scale, and it seemed to be fatal. The force of the impact knocked his helmet off, and his body was thrown almost 50 meters away from the wreckage, right onto the fence. But what exactly led to this disaster? It was clear that Villeneuve wanted to beat Pironi's time by any means necessary. But Pironi had already used up his tires. How unnecessarily dangerous and completely unnecessary it was that he only got 2 sets of tires for a qualifying session, which were only good for 1 lap. The real tragedy of the Villeneuve accident was that it should have never happened. His qualifying tires were shot. He should have been returning slowly to the pits, but he was